Dozens of daycares across Ontario are expected to be closed today as staff take to Queen's Park in Toronto to protest funding changes to the National Child Care Program. As many as 50 child care centres could be closed for the day, with protests slated to begin this morning. Staff at the centre say changes to the national program threatens their ability to operate. This, as the Ontario government says it will move to a cost-based system to fund the program. Joining me now with more is Andrea Hannen, the Executive Director of the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario. Good morning and welcome to the program. So can you explain the demands and why the protest today at Queen's Park?
Certainly, centres are very concerned. Not all centres, but some centres are very concerned about the changes to the way the province is administering the $10 a day childcare program. And it's a change in the way the funding is administered for centres that are participating in the program. But at the same time, centres that maybe have applied to the program but were not accepted or were not able to participate because there is a federal cap on the number of small businesses that can participate in the program in Ontario. Those centres actually, in the same announcement, they lost all their provincial funding as well. So I think with your protests is probably going to see some of the centres who weren't part of the $10 a day program. They would like to have been part of the $10 a day program. The federal cap meant they couldn't, and now they've lost all their provincial funding. As of January 1st, they'll lose provincial funding. And then you'll also have some other centres that the transition to this cost-based model away from the revenue replacement model, for them, they're finding that the cost-based model may or may not meet the needs to be sustainable financially, but also it's very, very intrusive. So even the process of calculating how that model is going to impact your center or your operation requires kind of a two-step process. One, where you're using an online calculator tool issued by the provincial government. And then once you have your basic information from there, then you've got to discuss it with your municipality. So that's quite an intrusive process. And I think people are concerned that if the government has that much say over your day-to-day operations, are you going to be able to maintain the quality of the services you provide?
So how is the province responding to these concerns from daycare operators?
Well, I think the province sees a lot of the problem as not having enough flexibility in the way that they can administer the $10 a day program. And I think they also see it as it's an underfunded program. And there's some truth to both elements of that. Certainly, Ontario wouldn't be the only province to have difficulty implementing the program. 6 other provinces have actually had to renegotiate the agreements they signed with the federal government when they first signed on to the program. They've had to renegotiate them since.
Some daycares have said they may have to close. What is your reaction to that, and what do you say to families?
Yeah, certainly I hope that's not the case, but I can see why they might have to. The funding formula, whether it's the new one or the older one, certainly the older one didn't keep pace with inflation, and there were a lot of centers under the previous funding formula that really weren't sustainable financially. They were kind of just breaking even or actually operating with deficits, and that was because the funding didn't keep pace with inflation. So if you're in a very precarious financial position going into this new funding formula, it may be difficult for you to remain open, especially if you're running a deficit.
So my final question then to you this morning is, do you feel the Ontario government is listening to daycare workers? Do you feel like there is an opportunity here for them to help workers?
It's always hard to know how much flexibility the province has with this program. You know, some of the decisions are probably within the provincial government's span of control, like, for instance, cutting the provincial funding to centres that aren't part of the $10 a day program. I can see that, you know, there would be some flexibility there. I don't know how much flexibility there is, though, overall with the federal program. Those agreements that provinces signed are actually pretty restrictive.
Andrea Hannen is the Executive Director of the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario. Thanks again for your time with us this morning, Andrea.